we would be able to project our consciousness today into the political arena to decide what the priorities should be, to determine how the wealth should be distributed in our society. If we had a political party that was based on a whole list of demands, that made it very clear to the politicians in power that a job is not a privilege but a right, and it's got to be a job that provides an adequate income to deal with the real cost of living much more effectively than a win button, that the right to education is essential in a society as complex as ours if humanity is going to continue to progress, that we need the medical care there in quantity and quality so that when we need it, it's available to us, regardless to whether or not we've been able to put a little money in the bank. That when we work 30, 40, 50 years of our lives to make these corporations rich, we're going to be able to relax with dignity. If we had our own political party that made it very clear that the thrust for equality is going to continue, and that thrust for equality is going to be reflected in the fact that we don't care what the color of a person's skin is, and that the inequalities that have been perpetuated in this society on the basis of that racial discrimination are going to end, because we are going to guarantee that blacks, Chicanos, Puerto Ricans, Asians, Native Americans are going to control their own communities. That we are going to control the money spent in our communities. That we are going to lay out the plans about how our communities should run. That we are going to decide whether or not the schools in our communities are going to be upgraded. And we are not going to waste any amount of money organizing committees to study us. If we had our own political parties, we could challenge the right of the employers and the politicians in deciding to cut back on government programs and make profits, soaring profits, in periods when the rest of the population is going through a crisis. Look at the oil crisis. What happened? The oil companies made record profits. Look at the meat shortages. Did the farmers get any money? No. The in-between, clearing houses, large agribusiness reaped record profits. Look at the cost of milk and bread. Who's making the money? The large corporations who suck up independence, who increase the cost of living for you and me, and make it difficult for us to get the essentials that we need in a period, and they keep on making money. If we had our own political party, a party based on the section of the population that works for a living, that labors to keep the economic system rolling, a party that was not a Democratic Party or a Republican Party, but a Labor Party, we would be able to set policy by deciding ourselves whether we're going to continue to give the rich $40 billion a year in welfare payments, an item in the budget that's never debated in Congress. There's absolutely no discussion on what portion of the wealth in our society is going to be spent on the national debt, but it keeps going up every year. It was $36 billion last year, and it's over $40 billion this year. What is the national debt? It's welfare to the rich. Interest payments to the rich. Do you remember agreeing to borrow any money at any time in your life from the rich? I certainly don't. But my entire lifetime, and the lifetime of every working person in this society, regardless of what class you consider yourself in, the low-income class or the middle-income class or the upper-income class, you have to pay that national debt. And it keeps increasing every year, which means that more and more or the money that you must depend on for survival is going to be attacked by that additional fringe, that additional margin to satisfy the greedy handful of individuals that dictate what kind of job you can have, whether or not it's the job you're interested in. This society doesn't care whether or not you've got a contribution to make. It's not concerned about the potential that you have to develop. It doesn't care about there being any real democracy, any real majority rule. It could care less about moving toward equality because it's not the kind of economic system that can deal with those kinds of human things. It's an economic system that will function as long as what is produced will make money for the group of individuals that own the means of production, the rich, the Rockefeller, the Mellons, the DuPonts, the Henry Fords, not Gerald. And if the production system will not make money, then its functioning is cut back to the point where the end product will result in profit. The question is being posed. What's more important? Human needs or private profits? The answer to that question can only be solved in the affirmative if the majority of us, who far outnumber the individuals who own everything in our society, are prepared to wake up to the necessity of challenging policy, are prepared to organize independent of the approval of the liberals and the progressives in the Democratic Party, are determined to organize and resist the assault on our standard of living, regardless to what the right-wingers and the Republicans disapprove of. If the majority of us who push all of the buttons that make this system go wake up to the fact that just as we run this system, we have the ability to control this system and move into action in an organized, collective way to do that, we can answer the question of just what the priorities should be in the affirmative for humanity. That's the kind of awakening that the Socialist Workers' Party has been committed to since our inception many, many years ago. It's the kind of determination, the kind of clarity that has been essential, that has made us possible to survive the witch hunts of the 40s and 50s, the continuing arrest of our leaders, the throwing and conviction of our leaders into jail, the harassment and intimidation by the FBI and the CIA. It's what makes it possible for us in this particular period to recognize that the economic system that was able to concede in the past has reached the point where that is no longer going to be possible. And the economic crisis that we feel today is going to be the condition of life that will occur again and again. You got a college degree? Well, do you know how to type? It's going to be important if you want to get a job, because there just aren't enough jobs anymore for all of the college graduates. The economy is in a downturn. Well, if you are not an employer, you can make certain, absolutely certain, that when they talk about economic recovery, that does not mean a whole new set of jobs being created in the society. It means a whole new set of workers being eliminated without compensation. That's what we can look forward to unless we are prepared to move and organize it against it. That's why the Socialist Workers' Party is so optimistic about the awakening of the American population in this period. We are encouraged by the fact that people are questioning government policy. We are confident that the black community will win the struggle to desegregate the schools in Boston, and we work with them to guarantee that they will win by building a movement big and powerful enough to guarantee that they will win. We know that women are determined to have our role in society redefined. That's why I'll join thousands thousands of women in Springfield, Illinois, May 16th, so that the demonstration to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed will send a message that even Gerald Ford will understand. That's why we fight with the farm workers for their own union representation, because it's the only solution to the confrontation between the big agribusiness in the Southwest. That's why we fight with the countless number of prisoners who were framed up and killed in this society by cops, from Dennis Banks to Gary Tyler in New Orleans, to J.B. Johnson in St. Louis, to Stan Storr in Pittsburgh, to Hurricane Carter and John Artis in New Jersey, to Joanne Little, to Cheryl Woods. Endless numbers of individual people framed up on the flimsiest sort of evidence, because there's got to be a way to absorb this excess, considering the fact that there is no place in the society for them. We're not campaigning to administrate capitalism better than the Democrats and Republicans. They're doing a fine job. The system is functioning at peak for the section of the population it was designed to function for. And that's the individuals that happen to own and control the jobs that you and I must sell our labor for in order to survive. But there are a lot more of us than there are of them. There are a lot more people that function in any one organization than there are people that give orders. Just think about it. Think about it. If you put the board of directors of General Motors on the assembly line, nothing would be made. If you put Rockefeller in a stockroom, he wouldn't be able to locate a pencil. We run this society. We run it. And we have the ability to control it. The Socialist Workers' Party see the struggles that have developed in the black community, among women, among the Chicano movement, among all the individuals in the unions who are fighting to hang on to their contract, as a decline in the ability of the private profit system, capitalism, to be able to make the concessions we need to survive. And we see that real concrete fact being the forerunner of those individual sections of the populations beginning to resist the attack on their standard of living, beginning to understand the need to wake up and struggle against the political solutions being projected by the Democrats and Republican parties. We see the prospects for socialism being better than ever in the United States.
We'll entertain some questions for a brief period, and then we'll retire to the Black Cultural Center, 517 Welch Avenue, for a reception. So if there are any of you now who have some questions.
You plan to take control of the reins of government through the electoral process?
Absolutely not.
How do you propose to?
I think we have to recognize who has the ability to change the economic system. We see the forces with the capacity to make that kind of a total and permanent change in our economy, changing who it controls and who is being controlled as the majority of the American population. When the majority of the American people understand that capitalism no longer functions in their interest, they will be forced to look around for an alternative way of organizing the society economically. In the process of identifying with a political solution or political program that is most compatible with what they themselves see as a guarantee for that change, they will be committed and determined to struggle until that change has been made. What we seek to do as candidates in the political process is to project that alternative political solution. and considering the fact that it's absolutely essential to begin to project an alternative to people in a period when the system demonstrates more and more it's incapable of solving people's problems and allaying people's fears, what we do in the Socialist Workers' Party is take advantage of one of those tools in our society that provides us with the broadest hearing. The broadest hearing. Every individual that has come to the conclusion that there is a problem with our economic organization and individuals who support a political solution that is an alternative to what we have the responsibility to be talking to the American people in this period when they are interested and want to listen. We use the political process to begin to develop that alternative that the population is looking for, to develop an alternative that they can identify with and one that they can support positively, not just reject the status quo, you see. Because they're not going to be trained in school. They're not going to be educated on the front pages of the newspaper. The radio and the television are not going to explain simply and clearly just exactly what the population as a whole needs to do in this particular period to guarantee that the Democrats and Republicans won't be able to implement the cutbacks on a much more extensive scale that they've already started, you see. They're not going to get that kind of information from the conventional means, the conventional sources of information that they look to in the past. They're not going to get it from the individuals that they identify as leaders, you see. That information is going to come from you and me and every other individual in the population that have already arrived at the conclusion that there's a problem with the economic system. In addition to carrying that message and helping that educational process, it is important that you're able to direct people into a way they can translate that change in their opinion into action, into the kind of effective action that will lead toward change. So we say, in our campaigns, we don't have to run the government the way it is. We can organize it so that it's human. And we can use solutions to solve the problems that we have permanently in a humane way. What is it called? It's called a socialist economic organization of a society. How do we get there? We get there by beginning to join with other individuals in the society who have reached the very same conclusions and are in the process of rejecting right now the kinds of changes that are being demanded by the administrators of the economic system. That's the Democratic and Republican Party candidates, the Democratic and Republican Party officials who are administrating the society. We join with the black community in Boston so that school desegregation gets implemented. Then what happens is it makes it impossible for the city government, the state government, and the federal government to continue to get away with reducing educational funds, you see. Because when you cut across the ability of this kind of racist implementation, racist allotment of the education funds and the whole question of public education, you immediately force those officials to have to answer the basic question: why aren't you spending more money on education instead of less? And that can happen immediately if the struggle to desegregate the schools wins its demands right now, long before we get to socialism, you see, right now. The kind of victory that can give the black community the encouragement to not just fight for equal access to the educational facilities, but to fight for the money, to dictate education in their communities. See, tell people honestly that there is an alternative. Explain the way it would work. Talk about how it can be financed with the amount of wealth we have to spend. Then direct them into the struggles that can win those immediate victories. Reforms, they are called. Win those immediate reforms to provide for them the encouragement that they are capable of resisting by struggling against policy and that they can win. It lays the basis for reaching that level of consciousness that says very clearly, if you demand more and you use the same process, you can get more. And the natural thrust of humanity is to want more and more. And that's good, because we have the ability to provide more and more. What stands in the way of that kind of continued progress is the economic organization of our society. The system has simply outlived its usefulness. The amount of advancement we've been able to achieve with the overwhelming investment of large amounts of money into one area in our society at one time could accommodate progress for humanity as a whole. But now it can no longer do that. And what has to be changed is not our expectations, not our standard of living, not an agreement to continue to be racially and sexually oppressed. What needs to be changed is the economic system. And people need to know that. They want to know that. They feel it already. There was a very interesting study made by the Hartz Research Associates for the People's Bicentennial Commission. And it's a study that everybody here can write away and get by writing to the People's Bicentennial Commission in Washington, D.C. They took a poll to find out just what the attitude of the population was in the bicentennial year. And they discovered that 66% of the American population was ready to work for companies under workers' control. They found out that 56% of the population would be willing and ready to support a candidate that ran on that kind of political program. They found out that a plurality in our society recognized the fact that there is no difference in the Democratic and Republican parties. And what is more, the Democratic and Republican parties are responsible for many of the social and economic problems we have today because they administrate in the interest of the large corporations. As a matter of fact, the entire list of questions that are included in this poll are nothing but socialist solutions. Socialist solutions. And what that poll revealed is that the ordinary American person accepts socialism. And if they fear socialism at all, it's the memory of what it meant in the 40s and 50s to be socialist or know a socialist or be within the vicinity of a socialist. And also the lie that's been committed against socialism in the countries that claim to be socialist, like the Soviet Union and China. If they know about me, I am guaranteed, in comparison to the kinds of receptivity that this campaign has gotten in the 16 months that we've been running, that they're going to be willing to get involved in one of the campaigns that the Socialist Workers' Party is involved in. And that's been a proven fact. We've been able in this particular campaign to project in a way it has not been possible for us to project since the 1940s. And that is that we will be able to challenge in a minimum of 33 states the Democratic and Republican Party candidates who will be running for the president, the vice president, the Congress, the Senate, and the office of governor, in addition to the local state offices around the country. We could not do that without support. Because it's an independent political party that's not Democrat, not Republicans, the very first thing that we have to do is collect signatures to get on the ballot. And for us, in that many states, it means that we have to collect 500,000 signatures simply to get on the ballot. And that means that we have to fulfill the individual state requirements, you see. If we didn't have the support, we could never attempt that kind of a job. And we don't project things like this simply because it sounds good. Those projections are based on reality. So we have the added responsibility as conscious people in this period, not only to expose the reality of why our economic system functions, but to also be a part of the process of helping to educate people about just what socialism really is. And we don't have a great many means at our disposal to accomplish that task. We don't own any radio, TV stations. In this particular period, we're not going to be able to purchase a lot of TV and radio time. So that means that the Socialist Workers' Party candidates have to spend a great deal of time on the road, and we do. A great deal of time. We cover the country over and over again, several times, talking about the socialist alternative, directing people to struggles that are going on, talking about how important it is for them to get involved so those struggles win.
I have a question, indirect question. Deals with psychology of the ruling class. There's a school, especially among psychiatrists, which believe that no matter what rhetoric, no matter what program, a ruling class has a certain psychology that it and its bureaucracy will probably always oppress the
Reflection of the fact that the historical information that we have about humanity is certainly either restricted within the development of class society or within the development of capitalism itself. It takes a historical understanding of humanity and the evolution of humanity to be able to understand that it is not human nature to function the way our employing class, our ruling class in this country functions. And in having that kind of historical understanding, it reveals the fact that it is tied to the economic organization of society and what can be reinforced in the society as a whole. If there was no need, for example, to define black people as blacks and treat them differently, and if there was no support in the society as a whole for victimizing blacks because they were blacks, why would people do it? We find that in periods of crises, there is a greater tendency for people to reach out for support, not the contrary. And that the way our ruling class functions is directly tied to the program they had to maintain an economic organization of the society which keeps them in power. It is not human nature. See, I don't think that in changing the economic organization of our society, I don't think that's going to be possible through the legislative process. I think that what's going to happen is that more and more, as the ruling class attacks working people as a whole to solve the problems of the economic system, they're going to force working people to wake up to the fact that their real problem is rooted in the economic organization of the society. And they're going to begin to exert their right to maintain and extend the material well-being that they've been able to achieve and they expect to continue. It's going to be the beginning of the development of a new consciousness in the population. They're also going to begin to recognize their strategic location in the population in terms of the real fact that they are the ones that dictate whether or not the assembly lines keep rolling, corporations keep functioning, all of the major industries that really dictate everything else in the society depend on their labor. And they are going to begin to refuse to work for anybody's interest except theirs. You see? It's going to be confrontation and struggle that will change the basic economic organization of our society. When they project things to students like 1 million of you must forget about going to school because there's not enough money to finance your education, and we won't need all of you after 1980 anyway, you have an obligation to make it very clear that education for you is a right in this society. Because you can't function in our society if you're not educated. There's nothing you can, what can you do? Nothing. Nothing. You have a right to be educated. It is as much your right to be educated as it is Rockefeller's right to be able to purchase a $35,000 bed that he doesn't even sleep in. And what's important for you to do in exerting that right is to join with other students like you, those millions, and demonstrate very clearly that, we don't buy that. And furthermore, we will organize together in action and exert our will on this policy until it is changed, you see. Right, right. And people will move around issues that affect them. Great ideas are great, but gut issues are what move people. And it's people in motion that make the difference. As you are affected by the cutbacks that take place on these campuses, what you've got to do is reach out and find how many students you can move into action around implementing the ability of the administration to implement that reversal program. They won't be able to implement it if it's not possible to teach on this campus. If students are all sitting down, demonstrating and picketing, you see, what are they going to do? They can't say they're educating anybody when students are resisting. They got to deal with you. And you have to be organized. You have to understand just exactly what you are demanding, and it's important that you realize what's involved in being able to win that demand. One more question?
No.
Last one?
We've got to go. If you still have some questions and you just refuse to go to sleep without having some answers, come to the Black Cultural Center and we'll try to deal with it for a while there, okay? Thank you. 517 Welch Avenue.